Today we're going to talk about Force. Force is your typical wizard magic class in PSO2. It's a bit more technical than some of the other classes we've covered, so this may take a little longer to go through. But today's build is Force Bouncer. We're going to go over the usual stuff, your skill tree, your subclass tree, mobbing and bossing strats, and recommended gear and recommended augments. Let's start with our class tree. We have 40 skill points at the moment, so this is where we're going to stick them. We're going to max out PP conversion, which is an active skill that reduces your max HP for a short time and increases your natural PP recovery. We upgrade that with PP conversion increase, which increases how many times we can use PP conversion. PP recovery boost, which increases your PP recovery passively. You want to put 13 points into this, that's all we need. Eradication PP gain, which is a really good skill. You regain 5% of your PP every time an enemy dives nearby you, or is downed. Technique charge PP well up. You can recover PP through natural recovery when charging techniques. Rest of field force. This takes your rest assigns and turns them into an AoE instead of a self-heal, so you can heal your allies with it. Slow landing charge force. Slows fall speed when charging a technique. United techniques force. This costs nothing and gives you access to hybrid techniques. We will cover those a little bit later, but this is important to grab. We're skipping all of these, but we're still going to have them. We'll get to those later, and why you don't grab them in the Force tree. Photon Flare, which increases max PP and damage dealt for a set time. It adds 50 PP, which is nice, for 30 seconds. This will be upgraded with Photon Flare Short Charge, which actually reduces the damage you deal with techniques, but also reduces the time it takes to charge them, so you can send off fully charged techniques faster. Photon Flare after PP gain temporarily increases your PP recovery once Photon Flare ends. And Short Cycle, which cuts the duration of, when we max it out, which you will do, it cuts the duration of Photon Flare in half, but also reduces the cooldown to half, so you can use it more often. Maintain PP gain, which is when if you don't attack or dodge after using a technique, your PP will recover. Elemental Bullet and Elemental Bullet Extended. Elemental Bullet, after successfully negating an attack with a weapon action, your next technique will also fire a photonic bullet of the same element. It just shoots like a magic missile that goes along with it. An Elemental Bullet Extended. If you refrain from attacking or dodging after using a technique, you will accumulate Elemental Bullets, so you can hold a couple of them. Rod React Advanced. Using a technique upon successfully negating an attack with a weapon action or dodging with Sidestep makes you invulnerable for a while. Rod Technique Hold. Sidestepping or using a weapon action while charging a technique maintains the charge status until the technique is used again. If the same technique is used again during this status, no PP is consumed and the charge time is shortened. And Rod Technique PP Well Up. You recover PP naturally while activating techniques. However, your natural PP recovery speed is reduced. To cover your subclass, we're using Bouncer for this. This particular tree is used as a Bouncer sub for a couple different things, but we're going to focus on what specifically you need for Force. And that would be Defeat Amplifier. We're going to pump that all the way up. Increases the down factor applied to enemies. It's easier to down enemies whether you're using physical or elemental downs. In our case, it's elemental downs because we're going to be using techniques. Partial Destroy Advantage. Increases the damage you deal and reduces the damage you take based on how many parts of the enemy you've broken. This mainly applies to bosses. Now, Bouncer has these 6 that we skipped on Force. Grabbing them on the Bouncer tree allows us to use more skill points on other things on the Force tree, which is why we move them here. They do the same things. Foe Brand, when you hit an enemy with a fire technique a certain number of times, I believe it's 3, a Seal of Flame is engraved. When you hit with another fire technique, the seal explodes, both causing an additional attack and restoring PP. Bard of Blot, when you hit an enemy with an uncharged ice technique, an ice sigil is engraved which can be enhanced up to 2 times depending on the number of hits. And then you hit him with a charged ice technique and it blows up. Zondiclad. Hitting an enemy with a number of uncharged lightning techniques will cause you to enter a high voltage state. You'll have like a ring floating around you. This state will strengthen the next charged lightning technique, after which you return to normal. Zan Gale. Hitting an enemy with an uncharged wind technique will affix a vortex. Hitting that with a charged technique of the same element will activate the vortex, causing additional attacks. The type of attacks caused by the vortex change depending on which technique you hit with. Grant's Glitter. Hitting an enemy multiple times with a light technique will cause you to temporarily be surrounded by a halo. While it's active, using light techniques will cause additional attacks depending on the technique. Activating another halo while one is already active will not cause the effect to stack, but will instead reset the effect duration of the already active one. I think you're getting the idea here. Hit things with uncharged attacks, or in this case, just hit things, and then hit them with a charged attack. They all kind of work the same. Uncharged attacks, then a charged attack that's better. Megan Sphere. Same idea. When you hit an enemy with uncharged dark techniques, you can stock up to 3 dark orbs. Using a charged dark technique will consume all of the orbs and increase the power of that technique by an amount corresponding to how many were stocked. So that is all we actually need out of this tree, but your battle power stat is increased by every skill point you spend. So you'll notice, even though I only suggested a handful of skills, you need to spend all of your skill points. Alright, so let's talk sub-palette, because Forces is a little more complex. This is how I set this up. First, you'll note down below, you'll see that this sub-palette is a bit more full than others. Obviously, PP conversion we have to activate. The rest on the list here, Famelgian, Baransti, and Zandiana Photon Flare, are there just so we can see the cooldowns. As for the actual sub-palette, you'll see I have the same weapons slotted into all 6 slots. Each of these slots corresponds to a different element. And that's because when we fight enemies, our focus should be on using whatever element the enemy we're targeting is weak against. A strategy for enemies is actually the same whether mobbing or bossing. At least in this case. And that is target enemy with elemental weakness and hit them with that weakness repeatedly until dead. As long as you're hitting them with the correct element, it doesn't appear like the technique you're using matters. Although I will say that every element, or every technique you use, does something different whether it's charged or uncharged. Usually the difference is whether it's a single target attack or an AoE. Each technique will do one or the other, and charging it will do the same thing. For instance, my right bumper spell does a cone of ice in front of me. If I charge it, does a bigger cone. Then there are things like this fire one, which does a ring of fire around me, but when I charge it, just blows up my target. But really, as long as you're hitting them with the element they're weak to, you can trigger elemental downs and you'll be doing more damage. You'll notice the 3 techniques that I put on my hotbar, on my sub-palette, and the gauge is building up with them. Those are what I called hybrid techniques earlier. They're really powerful spells that do multiple damage types, and they're built up by hitting enemies with other techniques. Those are kind of like, think of them as like mini photon blasts. I usually keep one on my back pallet, on the back of my sub pallet, as well as photon flare, which I'm going to trigger here. Usually when you trigger them, they will also trigger the corresponding elemental ability. Like this one, triggering Bardablot, and the light element technique when I use it. Now, I can instantly hit him for big damage against that symbol. Hell yeah. So, for level 65 Force, the weapon I suggest comes from the newly released Ordinal Tower. If you clear rank 7 with 12,000 points or higher, you'll get an Obsidia Rod and an Obsidia Talus. These are really good. So getting a plus 40 Obsidia Rod essentially for completing a quest, because 12,000 points is not hard, just get an S rank and you basically have it. That's really good. That's really all you need for now. If you want to push your luck, you can push for one of these rugged rods. That's a lot of money though, so I wouldn't. But this would be slightly better. It drops from the highest level combat zones and certain urgent quests. It's a huge pain in the ass to get. But if you can, or you have the money and want to just buy one outright, this would be like the best option right now. As for armor, you want the Ephetus series, and there are two different kinds. Ephetus Armor Belta and Ephetus Armor Sheza. You can use 3 of either one, you can mix and match, but these are the ones you want. You can get one of each Ephetus armor, completing the various ranks of Ordinal Tower for the first time. They also drop from the high-level combat zones, depending on what region you're in. Kavaris and Ratem will drop the ones you want. Just go to the high-level combat zones there, meaning the highest rank you can go up to there, the level 60 versions. They are still a really rare drop there. Now for augments. So the augments we want for Force are Mastery 4, which you can either buy, get them from the Augment Exchange Shop, it's kind of a grind to get them, but they're pretty good. Om's Soul 4, which drops from Om's Kavaris. Giga's Technique 4, which drops from level 69 Gigantics. Super Technique comes out of Cannonball Strike and Cannonball Rumble. And, of course, Technique 4. And that, I believe... Yep, that is all I really have to cover for Force. So, thank you for listening to this discussion about the Force class.